Let's be real with each other here. Pokemon generally is not very difficult. It wouldn't be as popular if it was, simple as that. But that doesn't mean there haven't been some surprisingly challenging moments and opponents over the course of the series, and that made me wonder, what is the hardest battle in every Pokemon region? That's what we're gonna find out today. Keep in mind, this video is not about the strongest trainer we face or the one with the highest level, it's about difficulty. The moment when the opponent is faced and what exactly their team setup is compared to what you're likely to have at that point matters much more than how high their levels are. With that said, let's get this party started in Kanto, which is, surprisingly enough, a fairly easy region. Normally, when series just start out and still have to find their footing, you find one or two opponents who weren't exactly balanced right. But here, pretty much every trainer makes for a fair and square fight, no matter if you're playing red and blue, yellow or fire red and leaf green. And yeah, Let's Go is one we don't even have to consider, that game poses no challenge at all. After some deliberation, I managed to dwindle down the numbers to two options, coincidentally both found in the same city. One is red, blue and yellow's version of Sabrina. It's no secret that Psychic was a completely busted type at the time, leaving you with very little actually effective options against this gym leader. Dark didn't exist yet. Ghost, a bug in the game made Psychic immune to Ghost. And the other bugs in the game? Way too weak to damage an opponent this powerful, both in terms of moves and actual Pokemon. However, the fact most of this team is one type, save for Venomoth, who is hardly a threat anyway, makes it so if you have found a solution that works for your team, you're most likely in the clear. And it only applies to the first generation games of course, not the remakes. And so, my vote for the hardest battle in Kanto goes to the rival battle in the Silphco building, which is a surprising challenge in every iteration of Kanto. While almost every opponent you face here has Pokemon barely hitting level 30, your rival waltzes on through with a total of 5 Pokemon, the weakest of which is level 35, a very stern power spike. And it's not some weaklings either. Pidgeot, Alakazam, Gyarados and a fully evolved starter are all part of his team already, making this a pretty severe challenge. Now, in the original Red and Blue, the movesets are a little lacking, but this was fixed in the remakes for GBA, so I would say those versions are the true winners of the hardest battle in Kanto. On to Johto, where I think we all know where this is going. Even in a region that contained the highest level trainer for like more than a decade in Red, at top of Mount Silver, the true hardest battle in this region is without a doubt the third gym leader, Whitney. I don't even know what I can say about this battle that you haven't heard a million times before. It's infamous for how much of a challenge she and her Miltank are. So instead of explaining why this battle is difficult in the first place, I want to instead comment on the counterculture I've seen that suggests this battle really isn't that difficult. Often heard are the arguments that Machop and Geodude trivialize this battle until it's nothing special. And to that I have only one thing to say. You are correct. You are 100% correct. But if you need to include specific team members in your team in order to defeat a gym leader, a monotyped opponent mind you, they are very difficult. Not to mention that is easy to say in hindsight, but a huge part of Whitney's notoriety comes from when the games were new, and people didn't know to expect this monster of a Miltank waiting for them. So yeah, maybe in 2024, when you're on your 10th run of Hard Gold and Soul Silver, Whitney isn't that difficult anymore, but she is still easily the hardest early game gym leader of the series and the most difficult battle in Johto. On to Hoenn, where we have a couple of candidates. First are the Frontier Brains, which require a certain level of competitive thinking and really test your skills at Pokemon battles, much more than opponents during the core game will. However, if you lack that knowledge of competitive play and team building, you will probably never get to fight them anyway. You need some big win streaks to fight these guys at their local battle facilities, to the point that if you're facing off against them, you're probably strong enough to handle what they throw at you, so I wouldn't consider them the hardest battles. Another opponent I considered was the post-game battle against Steven in Pokemon Emerald. However, with how late this is in the game, I would imagine you would already have a strong, diverse team that should be capable of defeating a pretty one-dimensional team type-wise, no matter how strong he is. And so, my pick for the hardest battle is another rival confrontation, the fight with Brandon or May on Route 110, right in front of Marvel City. Now, on the surface, this battle doesn't appear to be very hard. The team composition isn't anything too ridiculous and they have only 3 Pokémon. However, the circumstances make this battle a lot more tricky. First of all, it's in the middle of a grassy route, meaning that when you reach the point where you battle your rival, you have probably already encountered wild Pokémon and possibly suffered damage from that. This is also not something you can avoid during retries, it stays. Secondly, the levels are quite a big power spike for this point of the game. Most trainers here are around level 15, and the wild Pokémon are around level 11. Meanwhile, your rival has 2 Pokémon at level 18 and 1 evolved starter at level 20. That may not sound like a lot, but it's a hefty difference in practice. Any stragglers in your team that aren't completely up to speed will most likely be one-shot by these 3. And what I also factored in is that you can't really cheese your way past this fight. You can't spam revives, hell you can barely spam potions, simply because you can't buy those yet and lack the funds to truly stack up. So you'll have to fight, grind or luck your way through this surprisingly difficult encounter. On to Sinnoh, where the question isn't what is the hardest battle in the region, but what is the hardest version of Cynthia. Because just like Whitney, she is infamous for how difficult she is, and rightly so. Although, that said, I wanna give a very quick shout out to Mars and her Perugly. Cynthia has overshadowed how tricky this fight can be. But yeah, the champion of the region is easily the biggest challenge, and for over a decade I would have considered her Platinum team to not be only the hardest battle in Sinnoh, but the hardest battle in Pokemon in general. However, it has since lost both of those titles. What the new hardest battle in the series is, we'll discuss later, but the new Queen of Sinnoh is, well, Cynthia, of course, but her Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl rematch team. I genuinely didn't think we'd ever get non-battle facility trainers with a team built with competitive Pokemon in mind, but in the Sinnoh remakes it happened. The entire Elite Four has been given held items, fitting IVs and EVs and strong movesets, but of course it is Champion Cynthia who remains the most difficult. If this team wasn't around the late level 80s, but at 100, I genuinely don't think I would have beaten this. That's how insanely strong this team is. We continue to Unova, which doesn't have a true Whitney or Cynthia, but does have a few battles of the challenging variety. Lenora is only the second gym leader, but she is a pretty fierce opponent in the original Black and White. Another one that profits from how we most likely haven't been able to fully work out our team yet. Her Watchhawk is a very serious opponent at this point in the game, even if it's no Miltank. Getsis is at the complete opposite end of the game, but he's also a big challenge, as you would expect from what is effectively the champion. However, compared to Cynthia, he's not as strong, and at this point in the game, I think most will be able to handle him. Which means that my vote for hardest battle in Unova goes to one found around the middle of the game, Elisa, the gym leader of Nimbasa City. Now, she's not frustratingly difficult to the point you put your game down, no one in Unova is, but she is a surprisingly challenging opponent. Yeah, she's a monotype trainer, but of electric types, which have only one weakness. And since she has 2 Emolga, that weakness isn't even a real weakness. Her Zebstrika also has Flame Charge, while Emolga has Aerial Ace, meaning she can hit every starter for super effective damage, and good luck switching around that, because they also all have Volt Switch. Oh, and did I mention they're all lightning fast? Probably faster than whatever Pokemon you put against them. Yeah, Elisa is an underrated difficult gym leader. I genuinely think that if she had appeared in an early generation, she would have been more notorious than she is now. And then for Kalos. Kalos. There is in my opinion not a single challenging trainer in this entire game. Especially not if you play the game as it's supposed to be played. The Pokemon diversity this game introduced is wonderful, but it also makes the game a lot easier by giving you more options. On top of course the new EXP share, Mega Evolution and the small teams opponents get. And so I had to really think long and hard about who the most challenging trainers in Kalos are. And the more I thought about it, the more I came to the conclusion it's probably not one of the main battles of the game. I think Kalos is the only region in the video where the most difficult battles are ordinary trainers you find on the routes. Specifically, I am talking about Brains and Brawn, Frank and Sly, found on round 11, and Pokefan family Jan and Aaron on route 8. The factor in the middle of a route means there are no healing options nearby, which adds a level of difficulty the main fights of the game don't have, and both of these are double battles against strong Pokemon, who are definitely capable of doing some damage to your team. Frank and Sly use Mr. Mime and Machoke, both strong Pokemon for this point of the game, while Jen and Erin use Furfrou, to which the same applies. Don't get me wrong, these opponents aren't even close to some of the other fights in this video, but in terms of Kalos, I would consider them to be the hardest, at the very least from a surprisingly difficult perspective. Next up is Alola, where the hardest battles actually aren't against humans at all, but instead against Pokemon. The Totem Pokemon provide a surprising challenge if you're not prepared for them, with in my opinion Lurantis and Kommo-o as the two strongest. However, they pale in comparison to the absolute monster that is Ultra Necrozma from the two Ultra games. This thing is so ridiculously strong in such a janky way too, that it makes for a very difficult fight. First of all, it's level 60 when most Pokemon you face so far are level 50 max. Then, its attack, special attack and speed all get boosted out the wazoo, combined with the ability Neuroforce that boosts the power of super effective attacks. And of course it knows Photon Geyser, which ignores your Pokemon's ability. So yeah, good luck with this one. It says enough that I've seen most people saying they cheese this one way or the other, either with a Zoroark or by spamming revives or by calling in help from Pokemon Bank. Now, don't get me wrong, it's not unbeatable or anything, but never before or after has a wild Pokemon been this powerful. And in the relatively easy region that is Alola, Ultra Necrozma is easily the most difficult. Onto Galar, where we find a pretty similar Eternatus, who is not even remotely as difficult. While I do think Galar isn't as easy as Kalos, mostly because this game at least keeps in mind how many handles it gives you, it's still not exactly the most challenging title. I would say the most difficult battle in this game is probably Leon. While the DLC does throw some higher leveled opponents at you, you're probably better equipped to handle it by then. Well, Leon has a very well constructed team at a time where you are most likely still following the game's level curve. We're talking a well constructed roster, with a fully evolved starter, pseudo-legendary and Dragapult, the always tricky Aegislash, and of course his Gigantamax Charizard. Now, Leon is no Cynthia, Sword and Shield simply give you too many ways to build an ultra strong team for that, with EXP candies, crazy Pokemon variety and more, but within Galar, I would say Leon is both in universe and in game the strongest foe we face. We make a very brief stop in Hisui for the next entry, because one battle here is so far clear of the rest, it barely needs an explanation. The fight against Hawlo is in my opinion the hardest battle in Pokemon history, and that in a game where most fights are more for diversity than a true challenge. Anyone who has played the game will know exactly why. It's not exactly hard to miss, but Hawlo's fight is effectively 8 Pokemon long. First, you fight Giratina not once but twice, and then the Madman himself, with a team that is effectively Cynthia's. You know, only one of the strongest teams in Pokemon in its own right. Sure, Hawlo doesn't play fair, and that's what makes his battle so difficult, but hey, he's a villain, what else is he supposed to do? And then finally we have Paldea, which is a very difficult region to judge for this video. After all, you can go anywhere you want, and since the game doesn't really make clear where the level curve wants you to go, you're more than likely to find yourself severely underleveled at least once. While they're not super difficult at the appropriate levels, Grasha will crush ya and Larry will bury you if you fight him too early. But yeah, that also means there isn't one clear difficult fight in the main game. Because the DLC does introduce some opponents who I would consider universally difficult. The most prominent are probably the Elite Four of the Blueberry Academy, and while they are tricky, I think the fact they're mostly monotyped makes them more bearable than the most difficult opponents in Kitakami. And I'm not talking Kirin or Carmine, I mean the Kitakami Ogre clan, who all have competitively built team compositions and setups which have more type diversity than the Elite Four members. Who exactly is the hardest depends a bit on your team, but I would say Muramasa is probably the most universally challenging one. He has one Pokemon more to make a team of 5, and while his type diversity isn't exactly a rainbow, he does at least combine Ghost and Dark to prevent a full walkover. Unlike a certain someone, he also uses King Gambit in the appropriate places at a heavy level 80, making for what I would consider the most difficult opponent in Paldea. Or the Paldea based games, I guess I should say. Those have been my picks, but which battles have you struggled with in your Pokemon journeys? Let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, please consider giving it a like and subscribing to the channel to stay updated on all my future Pokemon content coming up. For now, thanks for watching and enjoy the rest of your day.